The avoidant person relies on their defensive language remaining indecipherable to others, using emotional distance and indirect communication as protective strategies that keep people at safe psychological remove. They operate under the assumption that their withdrawal, silence, and dismissiveness will be interpreted as rejection or indifference, rather than as the fear-based protective mechanisms they actually represent. However, when an empath develops fluency in their defensive language and begins responding to the fear beneath the facade rather than the facade itself, it creates a profound psychological disruption that challenges every defensive assumption the avoidant person holds. Their primary defense mechanism becomes ineffective. The avoidant person experiences profound disorientation when their usual strategies of emotional distance and withdrawal fail to produce the expected results. When they pull away and the empath responds with calm understanding rather than anxious pursuit, it strips their withdrawal of its protective power. When they employ dismissive language and the empath addresses the underlying fear rather than reacting to the surface hostility, their defensive arsenal suddenly loses effectiveness. This realization creates a crisis in their psychological framework. Their entire relational strategy depends on keeping others at bay through behaviors that trigger hurt, confusion, or desperate pursuit. When someone remains unshaken by these tactics and instead demonstrates they understand the wounded child beneath the armor, the avoidant person can no longer hide behind their defenses. They find themselves truly seen in ways they have spent years avoiding, creating vulnerability they cannot escape through their usual methods. They experience being understood without being controlled. The avoidant person encounters something they have never experienced, someone who comprehends their need for space and autonomy without taking it personally or attempting to change them. The empath who has learned their language can distinguish between genuine disinterest and fear-based withdrawal, between actual rejection and self-protective distance. This understanding comes without the demands for immediate change or emotional availability that the avoidant person expects and dreads. They discover that being understood does not automatically lead to the suffocation or loss of autonomy they fear. The empath's fluency in their language allows them to provide space when the avoidant person withdraws, while maintaining steady presence that communicates continued care. This paradoxical experience of being deeply known while remaining free challenges their fundamental belief that intimacy and autonomy cannot coexist. They begin questioning whether their defenses are still necessary with someone who neither punishes their need for distance nor demands they transform on anyone else's timeline. Their emotional walls become transparent. The avoidant person realizes with alarm that their carefully constructed walls no longer obscure their true feelings and needs from someone who has learned to read their defensive patterns. When they become cold and the empath recognizes it as fear of closeness. When they disappear and the empath understands it as overwhelm rather than disinterest, their emotional reality becomes visible despite their attempts at concealment. This transparency feels simultaneously terrifying and relieving. They can no longer maintain the illusion of invulnerability or emotional superiority when someone accurately interprets their defensive behaviors as protection rather than strength. The empath's ability to see through their walls without trying to demolish them creates a unique form of intimacy the avoidant person has never encountered. They find themselves in relationship with someone who knows their truth even when they cannot speak it, who responds to their actual needs rather than their defensive presentations. They begin trusting vulnerability. The avoidant person starts tentatively lowering their defenses when they repeatedly experience that being understood does not lead to judgment, exploitation, or demands for immediate emotional reciprocity. The empath's fluency in their language creates the safety necessary for the avoidant person to risk authentic expression without fearing catastrophic consequences.